All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the work of Gary Marcus.
Oh, yeah. He's a pretty fascinating figure, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. I mean, he's made quite a name for himself in both cognitive science and AI.
Yeah, it seems like every time I turn around, there's a new article or interview with him about the future of AI.
Exactly. And with all the hype around AI these days, I think it's more important than ever to understand what people like Marcus are saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need those critical voices to kind of cut through the noise and help us figure out what's really going on.
For sure. So for this deep dive, we've gathered a whole bunch of material, a biography, some of his key articles, even some background on the company he co-founded, Robust.ai.
Robust.ai, huh? I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, me too. It seems like they're doing some really interesting work trying to build robots that can actually function in the real world.
Well, that's definitely a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the real world is so messy and unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of Marcus's big points, right? He's constantly pushing back against this idea that we're on the verge of creating some kind of super intelligent AI.
I think it's easy to get caught up in the hype, but he's urging caution, right?
Right. So let's start with the basics. Who is Gary Marcus? Where did he come from?
Well, he was born in 1970, and he was kind of obsessed with the mind from a young age. But his path wasn't, a straight line into computer science.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he actually studied linguistics and philosophy as well.
That's interesting. So he was approaching the idea of intelligence from multiple angles right from the start.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that makes his perspective so valuable. He's not just a programmer, he's a thinker who's really grappling with the fundamental nature of thought and intelligence.
So how did he end up in the world of AI then?
Well, he eventually did get into computer science. He ended up at MIT, where he worked with another big name in the field, Steven Pinker.
Wow, so he was rubbing shoulders with the best of the best.
Yeah, and even back then, he was starting to develop some pretty radical ideas about AI.
Like what?
Well, he was already skeptical of what were then called connectionist models, which are kind of the precursors to today's neural networks.
So he was questioning the foundations of deep learning even before deep learning was really a thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He was already seeing the limitations of that approach and arguing that there's more to intelligence than just recognizing patterns.
That's fascinating. So what did he propose as an alternative?
Well, that's where his book, The Algebraic Mind, comes in. It's kind of a cornerstone of his thinking.
The algebraic mind? Okay, so what's that all about?
It's this idea that human intelligence is more than just pattern recognition. We don't just passively absorb information, we actively manipulate it. We form abstract concepts and apply reasoning like we do with variables in algebra.
So it's about understanding the underlying structure, the logic behind things, rather than just recognizing superficial patterns.
Precisely. And that's why he's not convinced that deep learning alone can get us to true artificial intelligence.
So if deep learning isn't enough, what's missing?
Well, he argues that one of the key things missing is what's called transfer learning.
Transfer learning.
Yes, the ability to take what you've learned in one domain and apply it to something completely different.
Oh, I see. Like if you learn to play chess, you might be able to use some of those same strategic skills in business or politics.
Right. Humans are really good at that, but deep learning systems struggle with it. They tend to be very specialized. You train a system to play chess, it can't then turn around and give you business advice.
So they get stuck in their lane.
Exactly. And that's a major limitation in Marcus's view. Because real intelligence is all about being able to adapt to new situations and apply knowledge in different contexts.
This is starting to make sense. So it's not just a theoretical argument. He's saying that these limitations of deep learning have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. And that's what makes his work so relevant, I think. We'll get into those consequences more in the next part of our deep dive. But for now, I think it's important to just sit with this idea that maybe, just maybe, deep learning isn't the silver bullet that some people make it out to be.
All right, well, this has definitely given me a lot to think about. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and explore the implications of all this a bit further. Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about Gary Marcus and his skepticism of deep learning.
And this idea of transfer learning, the ability to apply knowledge in different contexts.
Right, which humans seem to be pretty good at, but deep learning systems not so much.
Yeah, and he illustrates this really well in his book, Rebooting AI, which he co-wrote with Ernest Davis.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and there's this one example that really stuck with me. It's about image recognition.
Oh, yeah, that's a field where deep learning has really taken off, right?
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
These systems are incredibly good at identifying objects and images.
Like I can take a picture of my dog and my phone can tell me it's a dog. It's amazing.
Right. But Marcus and Davis point out that just because a system can label something correctly doesn't mean it actually understands what it's looking at.
So it's just matching patterns without any real comprehension.
Exactly. They give this example where researchers made these tiny changes to the pixels in a picture of a cat.
Like changes that are invisible to the human eye?
Right, but suddenly the AI was labeling it as a toaster.
A toaster? Seriously?
Yeah. It's kind of funny, but also a little bit unsettling, right?
Yeah, it makes you wonder how reliable these systems really are if they can be fooled so easily.
Exactly. And that's why Marcus argues that for AI to be truly robust and trustworthy, it needs more than just deep learning's pattern matching abilities.
So it needs something else, something more.
Right, it needs a way to reason about the world to understand the relationships between things, not just the superficial patterns.
Okay, so that's where these hybrid models come in, right? The ones he's always talking about.
Exactly. He believes that we need to combine the power of deep learning with symbolic reasoning, which is more like how humans think.
So it's about blending the best of both worlds.
Right. And it's definitely a challenge. But he thinks it's essential if we want to create AI that can really solve problems in the real world.
So how would this actually work in practice? I mean, can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine an AI system that can analyze medical images like X-rays or CT scans.
Okay, so something that could help doctors make diagnoses.
Exactly. And current systems can already do this to some extent. You know, they can flag potential issues.
But they can't really explain why they think something is wrong.
Right. And that's where the hybrid model comes in. It could not only detect those patterns, but also use symbolic reasoning to connect them with medical knowledge.
So it would be like having a doctor and a super-powered pattern matching machine working together.
Precisely. It could analyze the image and then say, okay, based on these patterns and what we know about this patient's history and the latest medical research, it looks like this could be X or Y.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It would definitely make those systems a lot more trustworthy.
Exactly. And it's not just healthcare either. Think about self-driving cars.
Oh, right. They rely heavily on deep learning too, don't they?
Yeah. But imagine a car that could not only react to objects it sees, but also reason about traffic rules, understand the intentions of other drivers.
So it would be like having a car that actually understands the unwritten rules of the road.
Exactly. That kind of common sense reasoning is something deep learning alone struggles with. But a hybrid model could bring that to the table.
This is all starting to sound pretty futuristic, but are there actually any real-world examples of this kind of hybrid AI being built?
There are. And that's where Marcus's company Robust.ai comes in.
Oh, right. The company he co-founded.
Exactly. They're focused on building robots that can function in the real world, like in warehouses and factories.
And they're using hybrid models to do it.
Right. One of their key projects is a robot called Carter. It's designed to work in warehouses, which are notoriously complex environments.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in a warehouse. Lots of people, forklifts, boxes. It's a pretty chaotic place.
Exactly. And that's why Carter's so interesting. It's not just relying on deep learning to navigate. It's using a hybrid system that allows it to reason about its surroundings, adapt to changes, and make decisions that are both safe and efficient.
So it's not just following a pre-programmed set of instructions, it's actually thinking about what it's doing.
That's the goal. And Marcus believes that robots like Carter are a small but significant step towards the kind of flexible, adaptable AI he's been advocating for.
Okay, so this is giving me a much clearer picture of what he means when he talks about moving beyond deep learning. It's not just about making deep learning better, it's about fundamentally changing the way we think about AI.
Exactly. And that's why I think his work is so important. He's not just criticizing the status quo. He's offering a vision for a different kind of AI, a kind of AI that could be more beneficial to humanity in the long run.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. But what are the implications of all this? I mean, if we're really at a turning point in AI development, as he suggests, what does that mean for the future?
Well, that's the question we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've been spending this deep dive really unpacking Gary Marcus's ideas about AI.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he's not exactly a cheerleader for the deep learning only approach.
Definitely not, but it's not like he's a pessimist either.
No, not at all. He actually seems pretty optimistic about the potential of AI if we can just get it right.
Right, and so much of what he talks about is this idea of moving beyond narrow AI. You know, AI that can only do very specific things.
Yeah, he's really interested in this idea of artificial general intelligence, right? AGI.
AGI. That's the kind of AI we see in science fiction movies, right? The kind that can actually think for itself.
Well, it's definitely still in the realm of science fiction, but Marcus believes that it's a goal worth striving for.
And he doesn't think deep learning alone can get us there.
No. He argues that we need to develop AI systems that can understand cause and effect, that can learn from limited data, that can adapt to new situations.
So AI, that's more like us, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where his push for hybrid models comes in, combining the strengths of deep learning with symbolic reasoning.
So it's not about throwing out deep learning altogether. It's about integrating it with other approaches.
Right. And that's a pretty radical idea in a field that's become so dominated by deep learning.
It's like he's challenging the entire industry to rethink its assumptions.
Yeah. And, he's not always the most popular guy because of that.
He's definitely not afraid to stir things up.
But I think that's what makes him so important.
Yeah.
He's forcing us to have these tough conversations about the future of AI.
Right, because it's not just about building cool tech, it's about building tech that's actually beneficial to humanity.
Exactly. And that's something Marcus is really passionate about. He believes that AI has the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems, things like climate change, disease, poverty.
But he's also aware of the potential risks, right? I mean, what if we create AI that's too powerful that we can't control?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And that's why he's been so vocal about the need for ethical guidelines and regulations for AI.
We need to make sure that we're building AI that's aligned with our values.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from Marcus's work. It's not just about the technical challenges, it's about the ethical and societal implications as well.
AI is not just some abstract concept. It's something that's going to have a profound impact on all of our lives.
Yeah, and the choices we make now are going to shape that future.
Well, I think this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexity of this issue.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more nuanced than I think a lot of people realize.
It's not just about robots taking over the world. There's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think Gary Marcus is one of the few people who's really grappling with those bigger questions.
Well, I'm really glad we had a chance to dig into his work today. It's given me a lot to think about.
Me too. And, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore with his ideas.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning more about Gary Marcus and the future of AI, be sure to check out the links we've provided in the show notes.
And remember, the future of AI is not predetermined. We all have a role to play in shaping it.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep diving deep.